Hello everyone, welcome to week 1 of the data analytics class. This week we're going to look at the basics of Python. If you already know Python, you're welcome to skip ahead to the assignments and quizzes anytime you want, or you can review the material, and I do suggest that you do the quizzes whether you are good at Python or not. It's good practice. So let's start with the basic data types in Python, and just like in any other language, you have numbers, and the numbers are either integers or floating point. And the way we specify them in Python is that they are determined by the context in which they appear. So here, for example, we have the number 47, and the number 47 is an integer. Therefore, the variable number of students takes an integer value and it automatically becomes an integer variable, which means that all integer operations are now applicable to the variable number of students. Similarly, we have 93.74, which is a floating point number, a decimal number, and the variable purchase price takes a floating point value, and it becomes any floating point operation is now applicable to purchase price. You can do numerous operations with numbers, so let's quickly walk through these, and we'll see that for every session that we have a IPython notebook, so it's a good idea to get used to using that. And in an IPython notebook, we have cells. So the cells here contain pieces of code. You can call them code fragments, and we can execute them and see the result. Whatever the code fragment produces is then displayed in an out box under the in box. So here, for example, we see that we've got an in1, which is our 21 times 21, and an out one, and that's the value returned by that operation. Note that it's not a print statement, it's just a value returned by the operation. The Anaconda IPython notebook is a very useful way of building programs. Obviously, you're not going to deliver that program to someone, but for building it, it's actually a very neat way to do that. And it's also a good way to present results of data analytics. But anyway, let's get back to our operations with numbers. So there's a whole bunch of them here. You can multiply stuff. You can, if you multiply two integers, the result is an integer. If you multiply an integer by a floating point number, in other words, if either operand or both operands are floating point numbers, then the result is a floating point number. You can divide one integer by another. In Python 3, it's always going to return a float. In Python 2, it's different, but Python 3 is always going to return a floating point number. You can always return an integer by using two slashes. So two slashes is integer division. However, note that if either of the operands in a slash operator are float, then the result is also a float. And there's some tricky stuff, like for example, if we divide 21, do an integer division by 3.2, we're going to get the lower integer bound of 21 divided by 3.2, which is 6.0, and it'll return it, or it's a 6, which it'll report it as a floating point number. Similarly, we can find remainders, and a remainder, if you have both integers, is also an integer. 21 divided by 4 gives a remainder of 1. If you find the remainder of 21 divided by 4.4, which is a floating point number, 4.4, then what you really get is 21 minus 21 / 4.4, which is 3.4. Try it and you'll see that. You get if you're raising to the power, you use 2 stars, and of course a floating point raised to power is going to return a floating point number. So that's pretty much it. It's what you would expect to see with numbers, so there's nothing very exciting about that.